I remember how it started like it was yesterday. Brianna and I, high school sweethearts, tying the knot just after I got out of the military. We were so young, only 24, but we felt ready to take on the world together. Brianna was a firecracker, always lighting up the room with her smile and her infectious laugh. Me? I was the steady one, always thinking about our future, how to make it secure. That's why I jumped at the first stable job I could find and signed up for college classes. It wasn't easy, but I knew it would pay off in the long run. Before we knew it, our little family started growing. First came Ava, then Emma not long after. Our house was full of giggles and tiny footsteps. I'd come home exhausted from work and school, but seeing those little faces made it all worth it. Brianna took to motherhood like a duck to water. At least in those early days. She'd have dinner ready, the girls bathed and in their pajamas. From the outside, we probably looked like the perfect little family. And for a while there, I thought we were. I never thought raising 5 kids would be easy, but I sure as hell didn't expect it to be this hard. Every day was a battle against exhaustion, a race against the clock. I'd wake up before dawn, stumble through getting the kids ready for school, then rush off to work. After my shift, it was straight to night classes. By the time I got home, the house was usually in chaos. Brianna was supposed to be handling things while I was gone, but more often than not, I'd find the kids fending for themselves. Ava, bless her heart, would be trying to help Grace with her homework while Matthew attempted to cook dinner. Emma and Olivia would be squabbling over something or other. "Where's your mother?" I'd ask, already knowing the answer. "Out with friends," Matthew would say, his voice tinged with a bitterness no teenager should have. I'd sigh, roll up my sleeves, and dive into the fray. Homework needed checking. Dishes needed washing. And little hearts needed mending. It was exhausting, but I never complained. These were my kids, my flesh and blood. They deserved everything I could give them. As the years passed, things got a little easier financially. My hard work was paying off, and we were finally able to breathe a little. I thought maybe now Brianna would settle down, be more present, but if anything, she became more distant. I remember Olivia's 10th birthday. I'd taken a rare day off work to throw her a party. The house was decorated, cake was ready, and all her friends were there. But Brianna, nowhere to be seen. "Daddy, where's Mum?" Olivia asked, her eyes wide with disappointment. I hugged her tight, forcing a smile. "She must gotten held up, sweetie. But hey, let's not let that spoil your big day, huh?" As I watched Olivia blow out her candles, surrounded by her siblings and friends, I felt a mix of pride and sadness. Pride in my beautiful, resilient children. Sadness that their mother was missing yet another milestone. That night, after the kids were in bed, Brianna finally came home. She reeked of alcohol and perfume that wasn't hers. "You missed Olivia's party," I said, my voice low to avoid waking the kids. She waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, was that today? I completely forgot. I'm sure she had fun anyway." I wanted to yell, to shake her, to demand where she'd been, but I was too tired, too worn down by years of this same dance, so I just nodded and went to bed, listening to her stumble around the kitchen. As I lay there in the dark, I wondered how we'd gotten here, how the woman I'd fallen in love with in high school had become this stranger who seemed to barely know her own children. But I pushed those thoughts aside. Tomorrow was another day, and my kids needed me. That was all that mattered. I never saw it coming. One minute, I was trying to have a conversation with Brianna about her constant absences, and the next she was telling me she wanted out. Just like that. No explanation, no discussion, nothing. She said she was unhappy and needed her freedom. Before I could even process what was happening, she was gone. I stood there in our living room, stunned. The kids were asleep upstairs, blissfully unaware that their world was about to be turned upside down. How could she do this? How could she just walk away from our family, from our children? The next few days were a blur. Brianna moved out, taking only her personal belongings. She signed away her rights to the house without a second thought. When it came to custody, I expected a fight, but there wasn't one. She didn't even try to argue for visitation rights. It was like she was erasing herself from our lives completely. I was granted full custody of all 5 kids. Ava, Emma, Olivia, and the twins, Jack and Lily. They were my world now, and I was theirs. Brianna disappeared entirely, not even bothering to call or check in on the children she'd carried and raised. The first few months were the hardest. I was working long hours, trying to keep up with bills and mortgage payments on a single income. Every day was a struggle to balance work and home life. I'd wake up at dawn, get the kids ready for school, drop them off, work a full day, pick them up, help with homework, make dinner, do bath time, read bedtime stories, and then collapse into bed, only to do it all over again the next day. I became a master of multitasking. I learned to braid hair while quizzing Ava on her spelling words. I could make lunches while listening to Jack practice his reading. I figured out how to juggle soccer practice, dance recitals, and parent-teacher conferences like a pro. But it wasn't just about the logistics. I had to be there emotionally for my kids too. They were hurting, confused, and angry about their mother's absence. I had to be strong for them, even when I felt like falling apart myself. I remember the night Olivia asked me, "Daddy, why doesn't Mummy love us anymore?" It broke my heart. I hugged her tight and told her that sometimes grown-ups make choices we can't understand, but that it wasn't her fault. I promised her that I loved her enough for both of us. As time went on, my bitterness towards Brianna slowly turned into a cold indifference. If she could abandon us so easily, we were better off without her. I threw myself into being the best father I could be. I never missed a school play, a sports game, or a parent-teacher conference. I learned to cook more than just spaghetti and meatballs. I became an expert at dealing with teenage drama and childhood illnesses. My love for my children grew deeper with each passing day. We bonded in ways I never thought possible. I learned to be both mother and father, to provide comfort and discipline, to be soft when needed and firm when necessary. There were tough times, of course, nights when I'd lie awake, wondering if I was doing enough, if the kids were okay, if they'd grow up resenting me for not being able to keep their mother around. But then I'd hear Lily's soft snores from the next room, or see Emma's artwork proudly displayed on the fridge, and I knew we were going to be all right. Years passed and Brianna remained absent from our lives. No phone calls, no birthday cards, nothing. It was as if she'd never existed. The kids stopped asking about her after a while. We became our own little unit, stronger for what we'd been through. I won't lie and say it was easy. There were days when I felt like I was drowning, barely keeping my head above water, but looking at my children, seeing them grow and thrive despite everything made it all worth it. They were my reason for waking up every morning, my motivation to keep pushing forward. As I watched Ava graduate high school, Emma win her first art competition, Olivia score the winning goal in her soccer game, and the twins Jack and Lily perform in their school play, I realized something. We hadn't just survived Brianna's departure, we had thrived. My kids were happy, well-adjusted, and loved, and that was all that mattered. I never thought I'd see her face again after 6 long years, but there she was, standing on our doorstep like no time had passed at all. Brianna, my ex-wife, the woman who abandoned our family without a second glance. "I want to reconnect with the kids," she said, her voice soft and pleading. I felt my jaw clench, every muscle in my body tensing. Part of me wanted to slam the door in her face, to protect my children from the hurt she'd caused, but I knew that wasn't my decision to make. "That's up to them," I replied coldly. I stepped aside, letting her into the house we once shared, the house that had become a real home in her absence. I watched as our children, no, my children, came face to face with the ghost of their past. Ava, our eldest, kept her distance, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Emma's eyes darted between Brianna and me, uncertain. Olivia, always the peacemaker, offered a cautious smile. Jack stood tall, protective of his younger sister Lily, who peeked out from behind him. Over the next few weeks, Brianna made sporadic appearances. She'd show up unannounced, full of smiles and promises, but just as quickly she'd disappear again. Each time I'd see the hope in my kids' eyes dim a little more. I tried to stay neutral, to let them form their own opinions, but every missed birthday, every forgotten holiday, every broken promise, it all served as a stark reminder of why we were better off without her. Years rolled by. My children grew into adults, carving out their own paths in life. I watched them with pride, knowing that despite everything, they had not just survived but thrived. One Christmas, Olivia's boyfriend gave her a DNA test kit as a gift. She was excited about discovering more about her ancestry. I felt a twinge of unease but brushed it off. What harm could come from a little curiosity? Weeks later, Olivia called me, her voice bubbling with confusion. "Dad, the results are weird. It doesn't show much of your family's heritage." In that moment, my world tilted on its axis. A cold dread settled in the pit of my stomach as realization dawned. Olivia might not be my biological daughter. I mumbled some vague response, my mind reeling. How could this be? Had Brianna's betrayal run even deeper than I'd thought? As the days passed, I found myself lost in a fog of doubt and anger. I'd look at Olivia and see glimpses of myself. The way she'd furrow her brow when concentrating, her infectious laugh. But now, those similarities felt like a cruel joke. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter. I'd raised her. I'd been there for every skinned knee, every triumph, every heartbreak. I was her father in every way that counted. But the knowledge ate away at me. I found myself growing distant, not just from Olivia, but from all my children. The coldness I'd harbored towards Brianna for years began to fester into something darker, more toxic. Had she lied about all of them? The thought made me sick. I'd given everything to these kids, loved them with every fiber of my being. The possibility that some of them might not be mine biologically felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I didn't confront Olivia. How could I shatter the bond we'd built over a lifetime? But the weight of the secret pressed down on me, threatening to crush everything I held dear. As weeks turned into months, I felt myself withdrawing more and more. The betrayal I'd thought I'd put behind me years ago resurfaced with a vengeance. It wasn't just about Brianna leaving anymore. It was about the possibility that she'd robbed me of the truth for all these years. Every time I looked at my children, questions swirled in my mind. Were they all mine? Had I been living a lie? The doubt poisoned even the happiest memories, casting a shadow over the family I'd worked so hard to protect and nurture. I thought I had more time before anything like this would come up again. The DNA test felt like a one-off. A hiccup. Something you could sweep under the rug and just forget about. Olivia's results still ate at me, but denial's a strong force. If anything, I'd convinced myself it was an isolated thing, and if I never had to look at a damn DNA kit again, maybe I could live with the uncertainty. But that Christmas, everything changed. We gathered at the house, like always. The tree, lights, presents hell. I tried my hardest to make it feel like any other holiday, even though my mind was still gnawing away at those doubts. Olivia bounced between the living room and kitchen, handing out cookies she'd made herself. She was always that way, so full of energy, so giving. Sometimes I wondered if that childlike optimism of hers was what kept us from completely crumbling after Brianna left. Everyone else, Matthew, Grace, Ava, Emma, they carried their own scars in different ways. They'd punched through life with determination, coping, staying busy. Olivia, though, she still approached the world like it couldn't hurt her. Maybe that's why she jumped at the idea of spitting into a damn tube for fun. So there I was, sitting at the worn-down couch, watching the kids laugh and unwrap their gifts when it happened. Emma started it. Something about overhearing Olivia talking about her results again, and whether any of the rest of them had considered doing the same thing. At first it was casual. A joke. Like it didn't matter. Maybe we're all secretly Russian. Emma laughed, which of course everyone else chimed in on. Ha ha. Ha. But it didn't stop there. Grace, ever the quiet one, piped up from the edge of the room. Maybe we should. Like all of us. Wouldn't it be interesting to see her cheeks were a little flushed, too much wine, most likely. But when she said it, there was more to it. It wasn't just curiosity. It was that gnawing thing, the same thing I'd tried to bury deep in me. There was suspicion behind it. I could tell. Maybe they all had it. Maybe they'd had it for years, just didn't want to say anything out loud. My heartbeat picked up. A cold knot tightened in my chest. Olivia looked up from whatever she was unwrapping, suddenly excited. Yeah, it's fun, she nodded enthusiastically with that same oblivious grin. I can get you guys all a kit, no problem. They have sales all the time. Fun. Was that fun for her? Finding out her father, the man who raised her, who sacrificed for her, might not be her father, felt like a casual mystery to her. Get them DNA tests, like they were blank socks in a stocking. Fuck. Matthew wasn't laughing anymore. He rubbed his temples, thinking it over, nodding slightly but not saying anything. I know Matthew strong, steady, and whatever he was processing in his head was dangerous. He doesn't throw things out there, unless he's thought them through. And if he was sitting quiet, it meant he was thinking through the consequences. He'd seen already what Olivia's results had done to me. The tense friction under my skin, those late nights when I couldn't sleep. I knew he had questions the same way I did, but he didn't jump at the idea like the girls did. No, he was calculating. And then it just snowballed. The girls took off on tangents about their heritage, laughing about who might been part Viking or royalty or whatever, but their comments sliced into me, deeper and deeper. I stayed quiet the whole time, typing it down in my mind. What if Matthew isn't my son? What if Grace isn't either? What if I've been living in some goddamn soap opera, and I don't even know the players I'm raising in my own damn house? I had to stop it. Right there at the dinner table, just shut the conversation down. But how? If I told them why, if I came clean about Olivia's results, there'd be no coming back from it. Brianna's betrayal would seep into my kids' lives in a way they'd never escape. Sure, the facade would be over. They'd have the truth. But what sort of truth was that? I couldn't warn them without it all falling apart. So I said nothing. I let them rattle on about the kits, the ancestry nonsense, leaving me there holding that bitter, painful secret like some kind of ticking bomb. I couldn't stop thinking. What's worse, knowing or not knowing? I couldn't handle it anymore. Brianna had always been the kind to disappear and reappear as she pleased, like some fucking phantom who thought the wreckage in her wake was just part of life's parade. But the moment those kids started talking DNA tests, no, I needed answers. I tracked Brianna down. Wasn't hard. She left breadcrumbs scattered about like always, little bits of her new life online, just enough to fuel her ego, no doubt. We met at a small cafe neutral ground I'd picked so I'd be far, far away from home. The minute I walked in and saw her sitting there, casually reading some trashy magazine, my body stiffened. Those same old feelings flared up, the rage, the betrayal, the absolute disbelief at how she could take everything we had and just walk away. How did I not see this sooner? She glanced up at me without a care in the world, like she expected all was forgiven or worse, like none of it even mattered. She gestured to the chair in front of her, all smug and casual. I didn't sit down. I got straight to the point. Did you cheat on me? That expression on her face never faltered, not once. And I think that was the worst part. She didn't deny it. Didn't try to save face, didn't dust off any old lies we both knew wouldn't hold up. Instead, she just let it sit there, like it was some forgotten inconvenience she half expected me to get over. Well, Tom, life's complicated, isn't it? That fucking answer. I stared at her, my hands trembling, but I kept them at my sides. I wanted to hell. I don't know what I wanted to do in that moment. Scream. Break something. Demand more than that pathetic little excuse she gave. You could have told me. My throat tightened. You could have told me years ago. About Olivia. About whoever else. Brianna, still with that cocky little smirk. Whoever else, I could have punched a hole through that goddamn table right then. Instead, I turned and walked out. I couldn't bear seeing her 1 minute longer. 4 steps out of that cafe and the world shattered again. Not just my marriage fuck, that's been over for years, but everything. Everything I gave to my kids was built on a betrayal. I knew this day would come, but I still wasn't prepared for it. The weight of the truth had been crushing me for months, and I couldn't bear to keep it from them any longer. As I watched my kids gather in the living room, their faces a mix of curiosity and concern, I felt my heart sink. Dad, what's going on? Ava asked, her brow furrowed. I took a deep breath. Kids, there's something I need to tell you. It's about the DNA tests. The room fell silent. I could see the tension in their bodies, the way they leaned forward, bracing themselves for whatever was coming. Olivia, Matthew. The results show that. I'm not your biological father. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Olivia's eyes widened in shock while Matthew's face hardened into a mask of disbelief. What? How is that possible? Matthew's voice cracked. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my composure. Your mother. She wasn't faithful during our marriage. Grace gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Ava reached out to grip Olivia's shoulder, her knuckles white. But you're our dad, Olivia whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. I nodded, feeling my own eyes sting. I am. I always have been and always will be. DNA doesn't change that. The room erupted into a cacophony of questions and emotions. Ava and Grace, my biological daughters, looked torn between shock and guilt. Matthew paced the room, his fists clenched at his sides. Olivia sat frozen, tears streaming down her face. How long have you known? Ava asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Since Olivia's first test results came in, I admitted. I couldn't bring myself to tell you right away. I'm sorry. Matthew stopped pacing and turned to face me. Does she know? Mom? I nodded grimly. I confronted her. She confirmed it. A collective intake of breath filled the room. The betrayal was complete, and I could see it etched on each of their faces. I can't believe she would do this, Grace said, her voice trembling. To you. To us. I moved to the center of the room, looking at each of my children in turn. Listen to me. All of you. This changes nothing about how I feel about you. You are my kids, period. I've loved you from the moment you were born, and I'll love you until the day I die. That's never going to change. Olivia stood up suddenly, wrapping her arms around me in a fierce hug. We love you too. Dad, you're our father, no matter what some stupid test says. One by one, the others joined in, until we were all tangled in a group hug, tears and whispered reassurances mingling together. As I held them close, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The truth was out, and we were facing it together. But I knew this was just the beginning. The fallout from this revelation would be long and painful. As we broke apart, I could see the questions forming in their eyes, the uncertainty about their own identities. What happens now? Matthew asked, his voice hoarse. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. We take it one day at a time. We support each other, we talk about how we're feeling, and we remember that we're a family, no matter what. Ava nodded, her jaws set in determination. And Mom? What about her? I felt a familiar coldness settle over me at the mention of Brianna. As far as I'm concerned, she's dead to us. She made her choices, and now she has to live with them. The kids exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between them. They knew the depth of Brianna's betrayal now, and I could see their own anger and hurt mirroring mine. We're with you, Dad, Grace said softly. We don't need her. We never did. As I looked at my children, their faces a mix of pain and resolve, I knew we had a long road ahead of us, but I also knew that we would walk it together, our bond stronger than any DNA test could ever measure.